Listen to the Vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. I'm very happy to welcome Jon Dawson here. We're going to get to know him, a new project called Electric Forgiveness, and learn a little bit about the album. So let's kick it off right. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
First of all, thanks for having me on the show. I'm in a band called Third of Never. Third of Never is my main band, and it's more of a traditional live performing band. And through a mini series of events, John Bundrick, who used to play with The Who, and Pete Townsend ended up playing keyboards on our albums. And one year, when we were making our first Third of Never record, the studio we were using, the one we used for the first three albums, was Kurt Riles, the Gritweeds House of Vibe studio in New Jersey. And we got locked out of the studio for about 2 weeks because the Smithereens were making a record. And, you know, bigger name on the other line kind of thing. But, you know, I understand that. But so I had started dabbling with electronic music, just so that was something I could do on my own, because if you've been even if a band runs well, after a while you get tired of dealing with a band. So the electronic stuff was a way to just do something that one person could do, and you didn't have to go through, you know, other people's schedules and opinions and whatever. And just as a goof, I sent it to Rabbit. You know, Rabbit's from Texas originally, but he lives in England now, so his accent is kind of half like mine, and is half British. So he'll say, "How y'all doing, mate?" You know, it's like Texas and England mixed together. But he loves spacey music like that, it turns out. And if you go to his website, he has several albums of his own solo material that is very, you know, he played with The Who and Johnny Nash and Bob Marley, and that's his main lane. But he also does this kind of soundtracky stuff. And he, within like 5 days, had put solos over everything I sent him, and we had an album's worth of stuff. So it was just something to do. And this time around, same thing happened. We had a break where we could not. We share band members with the Connells out of Raleigh. They had lots of college radio hits, and they had an international #1 with 74-75 a few years ago. And they're still a big. They just put a new album out recently, and they're still a big concert draw. So if they're off for 4 or 5 days doing shows, Third of Never can't do anything. So I started doing more electronic stuff. And this time we expanded it to include live drums, live bass. And it kind of, that project grew. So it grew from being something to do to kill time to, this record is too good to not put more effort into. So it's taken on kind of a full-time project status.
The only way I can describe it is like if you made a rock and roll Sunday and you put Frank Zappa, Pink Floyd, and sprinkled in a little bit of Rush and Styx. It's Are those your influences?
Most of those, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of information on the record for sure. There's certain eras of Pink Floyd I like. I love Pink Floyd up to like 75, and then after Waters left, I like that stuff. And Rush, I love pretty much every era of Rush. But it's kind of like a garage band making an electronic record, because, I mean, the whole thing started, I've got it right here. It's this thing called a chaosillator. Mm-hmm. And this thing has thousands of analog synthesizers in it. And it just started from that. And, but there is a lot of information there. If you listen to it, a friend of mine put it on and said they listened to it all the way through without stopping, and said he felt dizzy when he got finished, which I guess that's a good thing. They got a reaction.
I know the description that I read said you should sit in a dark room with a lava lamp with someone you trust. Like, yeah, add some mushrooms or acid to that too, right?
I've never done any of that stuff, but Rabbit has done it, and he said this is what LSD sounds like. So I'll take his word for it.
I would agree. Yeah. Now, noticed you had a member of the church on your album.
Yeah, Steve Kilbey. The Third of Never album is also finished. That'll be coming out in 2020 next year, 2024. And he did a duet with Doug MacMillan who's our lead singer. He's also from the Connells, and we sampled Steve's vocal from the Third of Never record for the Electric Forgiveness record. There was a lot of cross pollination between the two records because they were being made at the same time. So some electronic stuff from this record made its way to Third of Never, and then some vocal and guitar stuff from the Third of Never record got sampled and pulled over to this. And but Steve Kilbey's got one of those voices that sounds like he should be narrating a Mickey Spillane novel. And I just love his voice. I mean, two of my favorite singers on the planet are Doug and Steve, and I've been blessed to be able to work with both of them on these projects. And but yeah, Steve Kilbey, man, he can just read the phone book and you're interested. He's got that kind of voice.
How are you able to do those two projects, but still keep that sound? Because it's got to be difficult playing two different bands.
Not really. I mean, it's just really the Electric Forgiveness thing. The last Third of Never album that came out was called Austerity, and it was pretty much a live in the studio. 85% of it was just live to desk in the studio, and it was that was our guitar record. I call it Guitar Mageddon. And just after that, I was like, I need to back away from the guitar thing a little bit. And the Electric Forgiveness, there's guitar on Electric Forgiveness, but you can't really tell it's a guitar unless you pay attention. Mm-hmm. And it was just a palate cleanser, really. And then after dealing with electronic stuff for a while, there's nothing like taking this Rickenbacker here and plugging it into a Trainer amp and putting it on 11. So it's just kind of feeds the other. It's like if you get kind of satiated with one style, you can kind of drift over to that one, and it's a way to not get bored, really.
Was it a 6-string Rick or a 12?
This one is a 6. This is the old standby. This is what 80% of my recorded guitar, as far as electric, is on this. Also use an SG. I've got a Telecaster 12-string knockoff. It's called a Cozart. I think they were pulled off the market after about 10 minutes after they went on because they're really Telecaster knockoffs. Mm-hmm. But I don't really jangle with the Rickenbacker much. I tend to use it as a missile. If you put it in a good distortion, you can get it'll cut through really well.
Do you mind talking about your radio career? So I noticed you do a podcast and a radio show.
Yeah, I do podcasts. I started doing them for years. I wrote for the Kinston Free Press in North Carolina, mm-hmm. and my duties there, part of them, I ran the website, but I wrote 2 humor columns a week, and I wrote 1 music column a week. And with the music column, I would review a new album and then a classic album, because there's some people, if it's not old, they don't want to hear it. And then there's younger people, if it didn't come out 10 minutes ago, they don't want to hear it. So the theory was, well, we maybe catch both groups with that. And we won some awards and did well with it. And we started doing podcasts just locally with like people running for county commissioner or things like that. But then eventually I just got a hair at my nose and decided to pull in, I love that show Justified, and Nick Searcy's from North Carolina. So I just contacted him. I said, would you like to be on our podcast? And actually, the first big name we had on the show was Bill Sheft, who wrote for the Letterman Show. I used his name in a column one week just because I needed a name, and I used his name, and apparently he found it on Google and wrote me an email. Turns out he was a big music freak, and he's in a band called the Truants, who they don't play anything past 1967 or 68. So he's a drummer in a garage band, and he's also Letterman's, one of his head writers or head monologue writer. So I've done a lot of podcasts with him. I've done 2 with Thorsten Quaishne from Tangerine Dream. I love the recent stuff they've done. I've really kind of gotten back into Tangerine Dream because of the records he's made with them. I did a podcast with David Benconi. He wrote a book called Oh, Didn't They Ramble? It just came out about the history of Rounder Records. So, we're covering bluegrass, blues, electronica. We, try to hit all of it. And the radio stuff, the radio show I'm on is the Brian Hank Show with Jonathan Massey. It runs on WRNS here in Kinston. That's the home station. and it runs on it's AM station here in Kinston, but it's FM in some other cities that aren't local. And that's a Monday through Friday thing, 7 to 9. And that's more of a local events and a sports show. But the segment that Jonathan and Brian and I are on, we basically insult each other for about half an hour. It's really fun. And there's also other jobs that aren't as glamorous because, if you got a family and a mortgage, I don't feel comfortable unless I have 5 or 6 things going on. If I ever got to the point where I had one job, I would be nervous.
Right. What's been the biggest obstacle in your life?
Well, as far as musical life, the biggest obstacle is when we put the first Third of Never album out, we made pretty good money through BMI because they would sample radio a fair amount. And by the time we got to our third album, we were getting more airplay and more popular, but making less money because, BMI just for some reason decided not to sample college radio as much anymore. And now, we've had over 1 million streams, but you're making less money. See, in the old days, if you got played on the radio 1 million times, that's $2 or $3 per play. That's a pretty good Christmas. But when you're getting, 2.5 cents a play, if that, but you're being listened to more, that's kind of a kick in the pants. But musicians are going to do their thing because most of them are, we're not smart people. We just do it because we like to. I've been really blessed with a great wife and kids and family life. And even when I was writing at the newspaper, I won a lot of awards, and we get to meet people like Charlie Rose before scandal took him down. And you go to Raleigh and they give you these awards and they feed you. But when you take those awards down to the utility company to pay your light bill, they won't take them. So that's kind of a drawback.
What usually influences you to write a song?
I've got this old piece of junk Oscar Schmidt acoustic guitar. Wait a minute, it's right here. Hold on. It used to be white. And a friend of mine said, "Oh, I know how to paint guitars. I can make it look nice." And I said, "Okay." And they really botched it. It looks like it's been through World War II backwards. But the paint job made it sound like a Gibson. So most of the songs are start on that thing, then they move to the Rickenbacker. I just like to find chords that I haven't heard played 1,000 times. That's the main thing that gets me going. If I find a chord sequence that I'm like, I haven't heard those chords strung together in a rock or pop song, that usually gets me going. I try to get to the point where the instrumental works on its own and then worry about the lyrics later. Because lyrics are pretty easy. But trying to come up with some music you haven't heard 20,000 times, that's the harder part for me. So I tend to start that way.
I have a hard time just getting titles for my shows. How in the world were you able to get the titles you did for the songs on this album?
Well, there's a movie script that I wrote that ties in with the Third of Never record and with this Electric Forgiveness album. The album is called Original Score because it is the score to the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got financing for the movie, but we're having a hell of a time finding a director to commit to doing it. I have never seen a time where it's really hard to go to people and say, I have money to pay you for a service, and it's this bizarre. We lucked out and found Glass Onion to do the promo for this album.
Yeah.
But even these promo companies now, you go to them and say, I have an album coming out in 8 months, I need a promo company, and they just act like they're doing you a favor to even consider it. It's just a weird time. I never thought I would see the day when I had money to pay for a service and couldn't find anybody to perform the service. So, but the titles on the album are tied back to that script. So if you can somehow piece together what the story's about through those titles a little bit. There's a scene in the movie where the two main characters meet a guy. He's going floundering, and he's got a battery on his back to power the light on his head. And that's where this title, "What kind of battery was he wearing?" that ties into something. And It's about two guys who they're roughly my age, and life has really kind of beaten them down to a nub. And they decide to take a road trip down to the beach to see if some initials they carved in the pier were still there from when they were, teenagers. And it's just a road movie with a lot of really strange stuff happening. And there's a girl he dated when he was a teenager. They find out has a radio show, and they start to be able to pick it up the closer they get to the beach. And her name is Rose. And she pops up in some of the titles. So I think it could be interesting if we can find a director who's can be bothered to do something. So to be continued on that.
What's like in these sessions with the incredible musicians you have working with you?
We just like working with Doug. I mean, me and my buddies used to get in a car and drive all over creation to go see the Connells play. And the fact that they were a band from North Carolina, I didn't even think it was legal to be in a band. Where I grew up, if you didn't play beach music or something, nobody cared. And even when Third of Never started, we were the first band to play in Kinston that played originals ever, I believe. And, people said, "Oh, you made a stand for art." That's not really the case. I only know how to play what I write.
Mm-hmm.
I can write 3 songs in the time it would take me to learn how to play an Eagles song. And, Tequila Sunrise has been played enough. I'd rather hear someone do their own thing. So we kind of got started that way. But Doug, I mean, I was kind of intimidated working with him, but after about 30 seconds, it just floated away. And now Rabbit, John Bundrick is not local. He's in England.
Right.
So we record all our stuff here and send it to him, and he has a studio there and sends it back. But he's so disarming. I mean, when the Who played the Super Bowl a few years back, I was sitting right here, and he and I were having a Skype conversation. And he was in his hotel room eating a steak. And he said, "Hold on, man, I got to go play for about 15 minutes. So he gets up. They go play the halftime show. He comes back and continues eating his steak and talking to me about what we were talking about, like it was nothing. It seems like the higher profile people I've worked with seem to be nicer. You would think it would be the polar opposite.
Right.
I've dealt with some guys that are kind of on my level that are just incredible pains in the rear end. But these guys that have made it a trillion times over are just easy to deal with. Let me know what you want. Is this good enough? Do you want me to do another take? Just phenomenal. Steve Potak from the Connells played most of the keyboards on this record, and he did 95% of them in one take.
Wow.
And we had, like the basic album put together, and he didn't even want to listen to it. He just sat down in the Connells studio with me there, and I kind of had a guitar kind of showing him what was coming up and stuff, and it just flowed out of him. Sarah Bell, the lady who did those incredible vocals,
Yes.
I was kind of thinking, well, I want like a Claire Torrey thing here. I don't want words, but I would like vocalizations that kind of bounce off the music. And she improvised those in just 2 sessions. Michael Kelly played bass. I knew him. He used to play bass with the Gritweeds, and we did some shows with the Gritweeds, and we're using their studio in New Jersey. And I remember years ago we had a conversation about electronic music in Tomita, so he came to mind. I'm like, well, he's a rock and roll bassist, but he also likes this electronic stuff, so that was a no-brainer. And Kurt Ryle, he was in Third of Never for a while, and he was also the producer on the first few records. You've heard the drumming on this record. It's like a 43-minute drum solo. It's incredible.
That's
so
amazing.
To answer your question, we just got lucky. Everybody's nice. I mean, usually that's not always the case,
Mm-hmm.
but the planets lined up for once. So that's my best answer to that.
Well, they say you don't really want to meet your heroes.
Mm-hmm.
When it's come to actors, I can say, yeah, there's a lot of actors I wished I had never met. But
Right.
musicians, I'm like you. I've found a lot of them to be extremely nice, and I expected them to be jerks.
Right. And there are some. I have heard some musician stories about guys that are jerks.
Yeah.
they do exist, but I've just been really lucky, and sounds like you have too.
I have been extremely blessed to meet the people that I have met.
Third of Never was we were in New Jersey recording and doing a show, and the Who were playing at Madison Square Garden. So Rabbit got us backstage passes, and I was standing against the wall talking to a guy. He was bald headed and had glasses, and this is when the Who album Endless Wire was just coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Do you think they'll play a lot of it during the show?" And I said, "I think they play 5 or 6 songs from it. I hope they play a lot, because I like to hear bands' new stuff. I don't need to just hear old stuff." And I had a nice conversation with this guy for 5 or 6 minutes, and then he walked off, and somebody walked up to me and he said, "That was Phil Collins, right?" I didn't even realize it was him, because he had just started shaving his head. And he had on these, if I had known it was him, I may have tripped over myself, fanboying over him. But Richie Havens was back there, and I had my picture made with him. I said, "Do you ever get tired of the picture thing?" And he said, "No, this is the best part."
Wow.
And some of the guys in the Smithereens, I got to know them, and their drummer played on our first couple of records a little bit. They were all really nice. So I'm batting about 900 as far as the personalities of the musicians I've been lucky to be with.
Is there plans to continue Electric Forgiveness, or is this a one-off?
No, this is the second Electric Forgiveness album. The first one was just Rabbit and I.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first one that was actually a group of musicians, and I plan on continuing it in that vein.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple of other bigger names that were almost on it, but by the time we got to them, there was so much stuff on that record. I don't think you could cram a sheet of paper in there right now, much less another instrument. But and I don't want to say their names, so I don't want to ruin it. But the plan is to definitely keep doing that, and that's a great thing, because you don't really have to worry about rehearsals and live shows, because there's no way to do that record live, and everybody lives. I think most of the people live out of state. Some people live out of the country,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just the amount of stuff. It would probably take 20 people to play that thing live. But no, the plan is to definitely keep doing that. The studio I'm in here at home is still kind of being built, but I've already started little rough sketches of stuff for another one that it'll probably, hopefully 2 years from now we'll be talking about another one.
Well, definitely want you to come back if you have another one come out.
I appreciate it.
Do you have a website?
The website that has everything on Third of Never and Electric Forgiveness, and I'm also making a record with a buddy of mine named John Bundrick.
Mm-hmm.
He's a phenomenal guitarist and songwriter. He's got a great voice. His stuff sounds nothing like Third of Never or Electric Forgiveness. But the website that has everything would be 343 Collective. Just the number 343collective.com. You can also thirdofnever.com or electricforgiveness.com. They all go to the same site. All the band stuff is there. All the radio stuff is there. It's all under. I tried to do it in a way where everything's under one umbrella. Keeping 9 websites going is just nuts. So it's all in one place.
And what about social media?
You can search Third of Never or Electric Forgiveness. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. There's probably going to be some TikTok stuff coming. I'm trying to hire someone to do that, because I don't want anything to do with TikTok. But I know you have to do it if you want to, give your record a chance to be heard. So if you're listening to this, if you do TikTok campaigns and you have some follow through, look me up and I'll give you money to do it. That's one of the things that's on the agenda to do right now. We've been doing all this press build up for the album is out as of today, but I'm going to be pushing the record for at least 2 months solid. So there's more promo stuff to come. There's a website called It's Psychedelic Baby Magazine. They have the premiere of, we did a 15-minute video It's a 43-minute album, but we made a 14-minute video that it's a collage of some of bits of all the music. So if you want to get an idea of what this record is, go to his Psychedelic Baby magazine, and they've got a 15-minute video clip up there. And the video is footage mainly that I shot I live out here where the buses don't run in North Carolina, so there's a lot of rural footage. There's some stuff in town. There's some found video from these old military. The visuals are as berserk as the music, but hopefully it'll grab somebody's attention for more than 20 seconds and make them want to buy it.
Well, I am going to put all the links in the description to make it easy for folks to find you.
I appreciate it. Stephen Wilson from the band Porcupine Tree, and his solo career. A week or two back, he put a new album out, and he says, he was warning people, you may get sick of me on social media, but he said if you have an album come out and promote it for 2 or 3 days, it leaves people's memory after about a day or two. And if you spend a year or two making a record and you want people to hear it, you're just going to have to keep it in their face a little while. So we're trying to figure out ways to keep it in people's faces without bothering them, which is kind of a tightrope, but it is what it is. There's a lot of music that I like that I don't think gets a lot of mainstream attention. There's a German guy named Achim Reichel. He used to be in a German band called the Rattles, and they opened up for the Beatles when the Beatles toured Germany the first time. But around 1970, he started doing these experiments with his guitar and a tape machine. And he basically invented that thing, that Frippertronics thing that Robert Fripp later on, perfected. But he made a few albums as AR and machines, and it's this incredibly trippy, mostly instrumental music. And I just happened to see a guy named Derek Higgins on YouTube. He just held the album up one day, and I'd never heard of it. And it went out of print because the guy, Achim Reichel, ended up having a big career as a singer-songwriter over there. And he didn't want his fans to hear the old crazy, trippy stuff he did. So it just went off the market and disappeared. Well, luckily, a few years ago, they put out a box. It's like a 10 CD box set of all those albums. And it's just the best psychedelic trippy music I've ever heard. But if you share it online, people think you're making it up. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that that's phenomenal that I would love to shed light on. A lot of music that people don't know about that's great. AR and Machines just put out a live album, and I found it by accident. It's been out for a year, and I accidentally saw it online a week ago, and I automatically ordered it. But it's just, there's a lot of music that I would like people to hear that you're not, because you can't get on. I mean, I haven't listened to regular FM radio in years, just because a guy told me in radio, he said they used to program radio based on what people would like. Now they program it based on, they program songs so you won't hate it enough to bother changing the channel. Because if you turn on a classic rock station, you're going to hear the same 8 songs over and over and over. Some of those bands you mentioned earlier, the last album Rush put out, to me, is one of the best albums they ever made. Clockwork Angels. But some people, you talk to Rush, if it's not 2112 or older, they don't want to hear it. But the fact is, I think those guys got better as they went along. Some of the production got a little thin in the 80s, but buy the live albums. That's my main thing. There's a lot of music out there that I think it would make people, it would enrich their life and make them happier and be healthier, instead of listening to the same 4 or 5 albums that you liked in high school. Music didn't stop just because you stopped being curious about it.
Exactly. John, thank you so much for spending your time with me today.
Thank you.
And
this is an odd record, and it's hard to promote, so we appreciate your time.
I also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, well, I hope you'll come back, hit that subscribe button. And for my regulars, you guys rock, because you make it possible for me to do this. And until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless, and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts. And on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network